Dobro jutro, good morning everybody. Ja sam neku večer malo zajedno s vama razmišljao.
The other night I reflected with you a little bit about the two parts.
Ja bih večeras malo nastavio.
So tonight I would continue a little bit to what I said. I would refer to them as two parts of life. Or I would refer to them as life of the law and the life of love.
Često mislimo,
Very often we think, I'm okay, my life is good, I respect commandments, I do this job, I belong to this group of people. This is the logics that very often human ego can understand. And human psyche, all of the organizations and all of the governments in certain levels, they need such a structure. But this is not everything. St. Paul says that law is leading to death. Yet many Christians still continue to be enslaved in a law, believing that if they do the right thing in a certain way, they would obtain God's affection and they would obtain acceptance. A good woman, a mystic woman of these times said something like this. I quote her. As a child, the rules protected me from condemnation and from danger. The rules protected me from breaking God's commandments. I thought that the rules work, the rules function. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, I wasn't gambling, I wasn't stealing, I wasn't doing this, and this. And this is how my little list of righteousness continued to grow. I was able to say no to everything, yet I was aware that my life has a certain void. With everything, along with everything that I said, with everything bad that I was saying no to, there was something that was missing. The frames were suppressing me. The frames were made in too much, don't do this, don't do that. The understanding started to come one day when I was sitting at sofa in my living room. The room was filled with a warm afternoon sun. And as I was sitting and as I was silent, as I reflected, in just one moment I was able to feel as if the Lord spoke to me. You built your life that was filled with the rules. Your rules enslaved me and put me somewhere out and put you inside. I wasn't able to understand. Is life not that? Is Christianity is not made in what you did? Did I understand everything in the wrong way to be a Christian? If it is not about rules, what is that I wasted my life? If I understood that, all of that in the wrong way, what is that I understood wrong about God? And there's even more important question. What is it that I'm supposed to do right now to correct that, to make that right? The rules left me empty inside. But the feeling that my spirit was liberating me so I would be in a relationship with God, this was so alive. And I was able simply to refer to that in a word that means so much in my life. And that word was joy. it was a huge joy. This new awareness started to fill the void that I felt, the emptiness that I felt. I discovered that relationship with God, my dwelling in God, this makes me as a whole, as a person, both inside and the outside. And then she ended up by saying, maybe the word love is the best description of what I felt, how that enters within me. Yes, this deep knowledge that I'm loved, that I'm beloved. My path, my journey was maybe too long. From the law, from the bond race until love. But it was very important. My dear friends, yes, the law is strict. It limits. It is needed to man's corrupted nature. The law and the tradition are important, so they would discover the basic eccentric, and that would enable us to exist in a community, little community, family community, national. Without the law, life would be chaos and anarchy, but at the same time, we ought to understand that life is just a good fundament, that life is just the beginning, that it is the first part of life. I'm afraid, perhaps, that some people are not able to enter the second part of life at all. And this journey in the other part of our life is awaiting for each one of us. Maybe some are not able to come. Maybe some are not even trying around that. Maybe some don't want that. Maybe some don't even understand the power and the quality of love of Christ's law and Christ's commandments. Maybe some people don't even know that this exists. Generally, we are the culture of the first part of life that worries how to survive, how to create the safety, security. But we have a greater task, much greater task, to discover the meaning of all of that. Thomas Merton, the most famous American mystic of 20th century, he is warning us when he says this. We spend our entire life by climbing the stairways high up. And once we reach to the top of the wall, we only that we understand that our ladder is put at the wrong wall. My dear friends, each one of us, very often we see that maybe something is not functioning, something is not right. There is something that doesn't fit its own place, and yet we continue. We continue without even wondering. We continue simply to live in the real of our lives. And I presume that is why Catholics very often frequently confess, because they are in a circle, in the same circle of everything, of being this in the same. And then sometimes, ultimately, man can understand that the ladder is at the wrong wall and at the wrong way, or that he is still limited by the first part of life. Dear friends, life is too short, so we would make too many mistakes. And life is also too short for us not to make some of the mistakes. The mistakes that would make us acquire wisdom. The frames and tradition and the structure are keeping us away from the fall down. Yet at the same time, this shows us how to fall. and how to learn from these fools. Men. I refer to these fools. The fools, the first part of our life, are learning how not to fall down in the future. At the end, we all know, even as children, when we were learning how to ride a bike, that we would learn two things from falling off our bike. We would acquire balance, and we would get to know how to ride a bike. Those who think that they are never falling, they probably never got the balance nor learned how to ride a life. It is very difficult to live with these people also. They seem to be the righteous ones. They seem to be those who know everything without knowledge. They seem to be those who are always right. And their stubbornness is their greatest dimension. The question is, am I like that? In that first part of our life, there's too much defensive behavior, and this means that there are too many attacks. But human maturity and human wisdom of the second part is not defensive nor offensive. The greater part of the history has been wasted in building the structures and building the symbols, loyalty, the framework, and the public image. And then, in just one moment of life, man wonders and asks himself, what is the purpose of all of this? Or, as the Christ says, isn't life much more than food? Isn't life much more than clothes? What is the use to man if he acquires and obtains the entire world and hurts his life and damages his life? Or what is to be given in instead of our life? Yes, it seems to me that the problem is also in the first part, that we invest too much. We spend so much blood, so much tears, and so many years that it is difficult for us to imagine that there is other part too that exists. There are many traditions that use different metaphors for this journey. And according to that, these two parts are differentiating. And then they say, those who are experienced, those who have been tested, the scripture and the spirit. Juniors and seniors baptized, and those who have received the holy confirmation the morning and the evening. Or as the Christ says, Peter, when you were younger, Peter, when you grow old. My dear friends, only when a person starts living second part of his life, he can see difference between these two parts. Just like then, you can get to know your sins, you can get to know your weaknesses. You can fight against your ego, stubbornness, and everything negative in his book of life. God doesn't have any godchildren. God only has children. Each one of us needs to go over that journey. Every generation for himself needs to discover that field and the power of the Spirit. If we are not able to do that, then we only react to the previous generation. If life is just reaction, then this person is not going to be free. life is not going to be free. Yes, nobody can help us in this. Not our friends, not our mystics, not our brothers, not our sister, not the best friend, not spiritual leader. Nobody instead of us can do this job to cross this journey of seeking. In this first part of a life, God is mentioned so much and God is misused so much. God is so distorted, and it seems to me that he wouldn't be able to recognize himself either. Do you remember Biden's administration in the United States? So-called great Catholic in the United States. Not even dear God would recognize what does this Catholicism mean and refer to. Yes, it is right. Man needs his identity, his safety, his order. But man also needs this most important part too. When man does that on time, he becomes free. He becomes liberated from complexes, from fulfillment, from recognition, from attention. He doesn't have need to keep his identity, to defend his own ego, to prove who he is and what he is. When man gets rid of narcissism and speech about himself, then he enters the space of salvation. And I believe that only then man becomes so free and he can understand so strongly the power of the Spirit, then simply he's able to remove all of the burdens from the past. He's able to remove everything that burdened him, everything that he remembered, everything that the others told him and did for him, everything that was burdening his and her soul. And then man gets this attitude towards the past, and he's honest and he's sincere, and this what is past becomes exclusively the wisdom for him. Only wisdom. How important it is to understand well this part. How important it is to understand that even those things of the past, the things of the past that are most painful in one's life, these things teach us most. Therefore, we shouldn't suppress them. And we shouldn't be repeating them as a defense or offense system. Yes, we should use them for wisdom. So man would be able to step out from the first part that is narrow, that is limited to himself, immersed in his ego, in his little interest. And the first sign of entering in the second part of life is stepping out from our home, from where we dwell. Or, as we say today, very often, stepping out of the comfort zone. Once we step out of the comfort zone, the life would then receive its own journey. And then we would be able to understand this biblical walk. So at the beginning of the entire biblical story, we have Abraham. Go, come out of your land, come out from your father's home. Go into some country that I will show you. And this is the same philosophy, the same invitation to which Christ is inviting when Christ says, if anyone comes to me. And he doesn't forget about those that he left, the father, the mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, even his life, his past. He cannot be my disciple. He will not be able to understand the power of the freedom. In the other words, to leave the first part is the key of every entrance, of every beginning. The message of Jesus was not just invitation to the traditional classical conversion. It wasn't just return to the old Judaism covenant. Instead of that, Christ spoke about the change of awareness, the change of attitude of our lives. He was setting non-limited and profoundly spiritual questions. The questions like, what does it mean to die before you really die? What does it mean to be born again? How could one lose his little life so you would obtain the great life? Is it possible to live in this selfish world in love that is not selfish? The questions of wisdom, simple questions, and yet really great questions. Because Christ's great is really very simple. Most of the invitation of disciples of the New Covenant is a clear invitation to leave our Father, to abandon our home, to abandon our nets. Matthew says in 4:22, he called them and they quickly left their boats and their father and followed him. Probably man is not able to follow this journey of the other without doing the first part. In every life, this seems to be different, and it is really complex. It is really different. It is really maybe differently tragic or differently painful. So Abraham, he gathered quite possessions before he moved on. Saint Augustine got much pleasures before he continued to the other part. Our Francis from Assisi gathered many parties, many desires, much longing before he became holy. David and Paul, lots of killings before they understood God. Mary Magdala gathered many loves before the one from Nazareth came. And many of us have many ups and downs, much sins and much misery, our own misery. Before we stopped with our lives and we wonder what to do next. Mihail Grbeš, the last person of communism in 1985, before he started to be the first man of the Russia, he was walking one evening with his wife, and one moment he told her, tomorrow is a big day. He told her about the situation in Russia. He knew everything well, and then he says this sentence, the sentence that they refer to, sentence being most important in the political history of the second half of the 20th century, when he told her, listen, this cannot go on like this anymore. It is a very personal question to each one of us when in the first part of our lives man understands that this cannot go on anymore. I need to go forward. I need to go somewhere else. For men to understand that it is not just enough to respect the law, it is not just enough to live according to the frame, it is not just enough to live, to do the work. I said that very often, and I say this out of love, that in our church, at least this is how I see, there are only two parts of priests. There are those who do the work very well, finance in a good condition, everything is done perfectly, and everything stops there. You have different part of priests. That is invitation. It is power of the Holy Spirit. And it is very obvious what people will follow. The first preaching, when he said, convert, change to his listeners, change your opinion, change your status quo, and in the other words, you cannot go on like this anymore. Most of the people, the modern psychologists say, most of us are ready to bring the question only 5% of our current information about anything. And I wonder and I ask myself, is this really the truth? Is man so imbued with that he is always right? What he knows, what she knows, that with ease he can make arguments before the others. My dear friends, I believe that this place is such the place that helps us to enter the second part of our existence. It is not chronological. Sooner man enters, then we will be able to understand in fullness what does it mean that Christ said that there is only one commandment of love. It understands human soul. It is fulfilling. It is the foundation of man. And so it is foundation of his happiness, goodness, pleasure, hope. It gives him peace when he is dying. Christ made every life much simpler, pulled out from all of the possible boundaries and all of the possible laws in one. Or, as the great Jesuit Padre Rupe says, besides seeking and searching for the Lord, nothing in our lives is more important than to have love. Love is the fundament that raises you up in the morning from your beds. Love is the one that decides how you will spend your day, how much suffering you can endure, how much joy you can share. It shapes and forms your soul and your entire life. Yes, love decides about everything, and this is good.
Yes.
Because God is love. If this is the way it is, and it is like that, if God is love, then love equals God. So when man understands this simple dimension, he will be able to understand that he or she is stronger than all of the limits. If we take love as a fundamental point of our lives, then our life becomes simply rich. If you love your wife, it is easy to be a good husband. If you love your husband, it is simple to be a good wife. If you love your children, it is easy to be a good father, good mother. If you love Christ, then it is easy to be a good priest. If you love your job, then it is very simple to be a good worker. If you love your homeland, it is very simple to be a fantastic politician, great politician. Yes. Love makes everything simple. Love is therefore the fullness of the law, the fullness of life, the fullness of a journey. Love is therefore the fullness of another part. Love gives our frames the only meaning, the only purpose. In this second part, dear friends, I believe that something that is for man's life very important, and this happens, which is cleansing. That man cleanses his soul from the garbage of all kinds. Only recently I became aware of something that is called detox. This became very popular. It looks like that if we want to purify and detox our body, we need to get rid of what is extra, the food and drinks and everything else. And so this detox generally refers to the process of removing all of the bad things from our bodies. Isn't this the case with our soul too? We need to cleanse it. We need to bring it to God. We need to be aware of that process. We're all aware, dear friends, that there is much garbage in us and much garbage around us. How important it is to understand the wise saying, my friend, you are the captain of your soul. You are the master of your own destiny. Don't be using for excuses that it is somebody else's fault. I personally don't believe that. You are the one that decides what and how you will do. So when man decides to remove the garbage from our eyes, from our mind, from our time, then he will be able to understand the second part of our existence. Dear brothers and sisters, dear youth, Medjugorje is a place of encounter. I believe in these days that you met interesting people from all over the world. I believe that you stepped out of your comfort zone and maybe you met somebody new, somebody different, somebody who speaks different language, somebody that comes from a different country. And in these encounters, our life becomes very rich. Such encounter happened for me not so long ago. I was celebrating Holy Mass, and before Holy Mass we were getting ready. There were many priests and many those who were serving, and among them was a boy who was a little bit taller. So 15 minutes before the Holy Mass, he told me, "Can I text my mom? I forgot to say something to her." And I said, "Of course you can." So he took out the mobile phone from his pocket, and I was looking at the phone, I was looking at him. It was the old phone that was like, I don't even know that the young people today know how these phones look like. So I looked at him. He had this flip old phone. He put it back in his pocket. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Is this the old phone?" So I said, "Yes."
Pa veli, znaš što? Pa i 8 mjeseci
So he said, 8 months ago, I said to myself, this cannot go on. I had smartphone, of course.
ovako mi je rekao.
And this is what he told me. The smartphone did two things for me in my life.
Učinio me je nečistim
Made me impure.
i uzeo mi je sve vrijeme.
It took all of my time.
I onda sam ja rekao jedan dan,
And then I said, one day, it's over. That's it. And I ditched my old phone. I felt quite bad for a month. And my colleagues laughed at me. But after 1 month, everything was great for me. And you know what? I said, what? He said, I have so much time now.
i kad sam onda sebi rekao,
And when I said to myself, no, and it was easier for me to say no in the future.
pitam ja njega,
So I asked him,
koliko je tebi godina?
how old are you?
Kaže on 17.
He said 17.
Ja kažem,
And I said, ooh,
ako taj dečko od 17
if this young boy who is 17 years old is able to make such a decision in a world that is exclusively digital, what about us?
pa mi se čini on kao da je ušao
So it seems to me that he already stepped into his second part of life, and so young he became aware of the garbage that is polluting and destroying his soul. And he said to himself, no, this cannot go on like this anymore. And he became aware, I am the captain of my soul. I am the one who determines my destiny. And then he told me, he took out the mobile phone. And he said, oh, this is enough for me. I can text and I can call. For everything else in the school, I have my computer available.
poljubio sam mu ruku.
I kissed his hand.
I na kraju, draga mladosti,
At the end, dear youth,
je sve to moguće.
for us, all of this is possible.
Možemo brzo duhovno odrasti.
Very quickly, we can spiritually mature. We can enter the second part of our existence.
Ili kazati sebi,
Or we can say to ourselves,
mogu i ja tako.
this is how I can do.
Ili kazati sebi,
Or to say to ourselves,
ne može.
I don't want to do this anymore like this. Or to say to ourselves, I want to be holy, just like he or she is holy.
Ili kako to poznati
Or, as the famous
Joshua
Charles says, who converted to Catholic faith, and there are more and more people like that. He's the author of New York Times bestseller, former writer of talks in the White House. He's the speaker, he's historian, he's pianist, and he's only 33 years old.
i on kaže,
And he says two things.
ja želim
I want
mudrost
wisdom
ponovno učiniti
again, to make wisdom to be popular,
svojoj generaciji
to be popular in my generation,
životni cilj.
because my life goal is to be holy.
Moguće je.
It is possible. It is so possible. Thank you.